I used to think I knew who loved me. I used to believe the laughter around my dinner table meant something, that the hands reaching for champagne flutes at my parties belonged to people who would reach for me when I fell. I was wrong about almost everything. But I was right about one thing. I needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. My life looked perfect from the outside. Corner office on the 32nd floor, salary that made my parents proud, designer everything hanging. In a walk-in closet bigger than most people's bedrooms, I threw parties that people talked about for weeks, picked up dinner tabs without looking at the total, and never questioned why my phone buzzed constantly with invitations and requests. I thought it was love. I thought it was friendship. I thought it was family caring about family. But late at night, when the noise died down and the guests went home, I'd sit in my pristine apartment and feel this hollow ache in my chest. Like I was performing in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Like I was buying relationships with my credit card and calling it connection. The doubt started small, just a whisper in quiet moments, but it grew louder every time. Someone mentioned my latest promotion before asking how I was doing. Every time conversations shifted to what I could provide rather than who I was becoming. That's when I decided to find out who would love me with empty pockets and a broken crown. That's when I chose to lose everything on purpose, just to see who would stay when there was nothing left to gain from knowing me. The plan took months to orchestrate. I couldn't just disappear. That would be too obvious, too clean. It had to look real, feel devastating, seem irreversible. I started by confiding in my closest friend about bad investments, letting worry creep into my voice during phone calls. I began declining expensive dinners, claiming I was cutting back, while watching her face change from concern to something else, something colder. I fed the story carefully, deliberately, like tending a garden of lies that would bloom into the truth about everyone around me. I told my family first. Sat in my childhood kitchen, the one where my mother had taught me that success meant never having to ask for help, and I lied through my teeth about losing my job, about the company downsizing, about my savings disappearing in a market crash. That never happened. I watched my father's face shift from shock to disappointment, to something that looked like shame, as if my failure reflected on him. My sister immediately started calculating in her head. I could see it in her eyes, how this would affect her upcoming wedding, whether I'd still be able to contribute to the gift she'd already promised our parents. The first people to disappear were the loudest. The friends who'd been calling me every weekend, who'd acted like my apartment was their second home, who'd treated my generosity like an endless fountain. Suddenly, they were busy, unavailable. Their responses to my messages grew shorter, less frequent, until the silence stretched between us like a chasm I couldn't cross even if I wanted to. My phone used to ring 15 times a day. Within 3 weeks, it barely rang at all. The invitations stopped coming. The group chats went quiet when I joined them. People who used to seek my advice about everything from career moves to relationship drama suddenly seemed to have figured everything out on their own. I watched my social circle shrink like a balloon losing air, and each person who faded away took a piece of my faith in humanity with them. But the professional world was the cruelest. Colleagues I'd mentored, whose careers I'd championed, whose families I'd celebrated with, treated me like I was contagious. They'd see me coming and suddenly remember urgent meetings they had to attend. The same people who'd laughed at my jokes in conference rooms now looked right through me in hallways. Success, I learned, wasn't just about what you achieved. It was about what others could gain from your achievements. And when there was nothing left to gain, I became invisible. My family's reaction cut the deepest because I'd expected better from them. My mother started ending our phone calls sooner, always having somewhere else to be. My father began giving me advice I'd never asked for, treating me like a child who'd made irresponsible choices rather than a daughter facing unexpected hardship. They loved me. I knew they loved me. But their love came with conditions I'd never noticed before, conditions that required me to be successful, stable, someone they could be proud of rather than worried about. The loneliness was suffocating. I'd created this elaborate fiction to uncover the truth, But the truth was more devastating than I'd imagined. I spent nights walking through my neighborhood, watching families through windows, wondering if any of those relationships would survive, the kind of test I'd put mine through. I started to question whether I'd been wrong about everyone, whether I'd misunderstood the nature of love itself. Maybe this was just how the world worked. Maybe I'd been naive to expect anything different. But then something unexpected happened. The people I'd barely noticed before began to notice me. Mrs. Chen from the corner market, who I'd exchanged polite smiles with for years, started asking how I was doing with genuine concern in her voice. She'd slip an extra apple into my bag when she thought I wasn't looking, refusing payment with a wave of her weathered hand. The security guard in my building, whose name I'd shamefully never learned despite 5 years of passing him daily, started, walking me to my car when I worked late, making sure I got home safely. Sarah, the junior associate from my office who I'd helped with a presentation once, was the only colleague who continued reaching out. She'd text me job listings, offer to buy me coffee, ask if I needed anything without making it feel like charity. She didn't have much herself, still paying off student loans, living with 3 roommates, wearing the same 5 outfits to work. But she shared what she could with the kind of generosity that has nothing to do with bank account balances. My neighbor Jake, who I'd only known through brief elevator conversations, started inviting me to his family dinners. His wife would make extra portions by accident, and their children would insist I help with their homework, making me feel useful when I felt most useless. They never asked about my situation directly, never made me explain or justify anything. They just opened their door and their table and their hearts without expectation or judgment. Even my grandmother, who I'd visited dutifully but not frequently, became a lifeline I hadn't expected. She'd call every few days with stories about her own difficult times, reminding me that hardship was temporary but character was permanent. She'd lived through the Depression, through war, through losses I could barely imagine, and yet she spoke about resilience like it was a muscle that grew stronger with use. Her love felt unconditional in a way that made me remember what family was supposed to feel like. These people didn't love me for what I could do for them. They loved me for who I was when everything else was stripped away. They saw value in me that had nothing to do with my job title or my bank balance or my ability to pick up restaurant tabs. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I felt genuinely cared for rather than just useful. 3 months into my experiment, I couldn't take it anymore. Not because the isolation was unbearable, though it was, but because the people who'd stayed, who'd shown up without being asked, deserved to know the truth. They deserved to know that their kindness wasn't born from pity, but from genuine goodness. That they'd given their hearts to someone who was secretly whole rather than broken. I started with Sarah. Invited her to the coffee shop where she'd been, meeting me every Friday, watching her face change from confusion to disbelief, to something close to anger as I explained everything. How I'd fabricated the job loss, the financial ruin, the desperate circumstances. How I'd tested everyone in my life to see who would remain when there was nothing left to gain. She was quiet for a long time, stirring her latte with mechanical precision while processing what I'd told her. "You lied to me," she said finally, and the hurt in her voice made my chest tight. "I worried about you. I lost sleep wondering if you were okay, if there was more I could do to help." But then she looked up, and I saw something else in her eyes. Understanding, maybe even respect. "But I get why you did it, and I'm glad you trusted me enough to tell me the truth." My grandmother laughed when I confessed, actually laughed, like she'd been expecting this revelation all along. "Honey," she said, patting my hand with fingers soft as tissue paper. "I've lived long enough to know the difference between someone who's truly struggling and someone who's searching for something. You were always searching. I'm just glad you found what you were looking for." Jake and his family took the news with the kind of grace that reinforced why they'd been worth keeping in the first place. His wife hugged me tight and said, "We didn't help you because we thought you needed it. We helped you because we liked having you around." Their children, with the brutal honesty that only children possess. Wanted to know if this meant I could afford better Christmas presents now, which made everyone laugh until tears came. But the people who'd abandoned me, that conversation was different. I called my former best friend, the one who'd disappeared the moment my circumstances changed, and told her everything. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was defensive, angry. "That's not fair," she said. "You manipulated all of us. You made us think you were in trouble." "I was in trouble," I told her. "Just not the kind you thought. I needed to know who would love me without conditions, and now I do." She accused me of being cruel, of playing games with people's emotions, of testing relationships that shouldn't need testing. Maybe she was right. Maybe what I'd done was unfair. But her reaction told me everything I needed to know about the difference between the relationships